the Conservative Party and many others are calling on Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, someone who in opposition called for a big inquiry into what happened in Oldham. And in 2018 she said, I'm with Lucy Allen, Telford's MP, who is pressing the government for an independent investigation into grooming in the town. Hitching these incidents to the child sex abuse inquiry does nothing to understand the specifics that lead to exploitation on this scale. We need to create a vehicle to tackle the specific nature of grooming gangs. Well, she has decided now, as minister, now that she's in power, not to do that. And we know that Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, and Alicia Kearns, the Shadow Minister for National Security and Safeguarding, we were hoping to speak to her after 5, but apparently she is unwell. We know that there is an attempt anyway to get a request from Oldham Council to launch a public inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Oldham, but that has been refused by Jess Phillips. So I want to talk to Chris Tuck now, who is a child sexual abuse survivor herself. She was on the Victim and Survivor Consultative Panel for the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse for 8 years. Chris, thank you for joining me today. Apologies for keeping you waiting because of the news that was coming out of New Orleans. I wonder what you make of what Jess Phillips has done or indeed not done today.
So I was thinking about what I was going to say to you today, because you can absolutely feel the anger and the angst from the victim and survivors in Oldham. Like in every town we've had nationwide where there has been an issue with grooming gangs or organised networks, whatever you want to call them. We have to acknowledge where we have a problem, and we have to take constructive and foundational action to tackle what is actually going on, because at the centre of all of this is victim and survivors, people's lives that are impacted on a day-to-day basis.
Tell us what is going on, what has gone on, and what is continuing to go on, Chris.
What, nationwide?
Yes, and in Oldham as well.
In every town and every city, there is organised networks of different ethnicities sexually abusing, exploiting young people, and it is a crime, and we need to be responding to it as such. It is a crime, and these lives are being destroyed, and we've got to stop the bickering, we've got to stop the talking, and we've got to take the action that is needed to better protect children and young people. That is the bottom line in all of this. And all I've seen across social media, Peter, is a lot of political point scoring, a lot of people in power having their say, but no one actually getting round a table and going, right, this is the issue, this is our understanding, yes, there is a problem, now what action are we going to take collectively to make sure that this problem doesn't carry on next year, 5 years, 10 years, because this has been going on for decades, Peter. And I personally am sick and tired of having the same conversations time and time again. Now, when you are in opposition, it's easy to make promises and claims. When you are the people in power, I've worked with Conservatives and I've worked with Labour, and no one at present has done what is needed.
What is needed? What actually needs to happen? What, if you could wave a magic wand and stop this problem, what would that actually look like, Chris?
Acknowledging that the problem exists, understanding that there are victims and survivors whose lives are being impacted, as I've said, and taking decisive action on what needs to happen. And it's all laid bare, Peter, in the ICSA report, the final report. This was published in October 2022, as you know, and not one recommendation has been implemented yet. It's very thick, but it's based on 7,000 accounts from survivors, not all sexual exploitation, but all of sexual abuse, and all who have been either abused within a family home, within an institution, or who have been let down by an institution. So this is not just about, in my opinion, not just about grooming gangs. It's about online abuse. It's about the grooming gangs. It's about abuse within the family home environment. It's a much bigger problem. It's endemic within our society. It is an epidemic, okay? And it needs to be sorted. Foundational whole systems approach. We need a child protection authority. We need a child minister. We need to tackle this at the root, because otherwise we're just going to go on generation after generation with impact, and we have to stop it. We've got to stop the rot. We have to stop the rot. We have to take decisive action, and that means people in power getting around a table, cross-party, and actually working with victim and survivors and professionals to make these foundational, impactful changes.
Can I ask you just if all of that I totally agree with and makes perfect sense. In terms of a public inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Oldham, given that you just held up that big document there with all the different recommendations that haven't been implemented, do you think a further inquiry would actually work, or do you actually just know what needs to be done and it just hasn't been done?
So my personal opinion is, if I was a victim and survivor in Oldham, I would want a public inquiry, full stop, okay? But knowing what I know now, going through an 8-year inquiry and not having one of the recommendations implemented, it's really frustrating to go through all of that work, to get all of the evidence and no action being taken. So would an inquiry within Oldham help make changes for the long term? Probably not, if it's not going to be acted on, like this report's not been acted on. But if I was the victim and survivor in Oldham, I would want an inquiry into the issues that were going on in my town and that were impacting me. Does that make sense?
Chris, thank you very much. You've spoken really well there. Chris Tuck there, who is a child sexual abuse survivor herself. She was on the Victim and Survivor Consultative Panel for the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse for 8 years.